we have to be balancing our consumption of news and that doom and gloom with the consumption of hope and truth that comes from Scripture. Welcome to the Raising Godly Girls podcast, presented by American Heritage Girls. We're here to provide insight and inspiration to raise godly girls in a challenging cultural moment. We design our podcast with breaks to give you space to pause, to pray, to think, and to have conversations with those you may be listening with. We're so glad you're joining us today. Welcome to Raising Godly Girls. My name is Rachel Culpepper, and I'm here with my co-host, Melissa Bearden.
Hello. Thanks for tuning in today, y'all. I appreciate it.
So, Melissa, this week on the podcast, we're talking about how we can stay informed on current events and engage in the world in a way that honors God, which can be a challenge, right? When the news is kind of doom and gloom a lot of the time. So last episode, we talked a little bit about media literacy and how to guide our girls to view current events through that lens of a biblical worldview.
Yeah, I love how this RGG podcast, gives us a place to really share what's worked for us as real moms in this real world, but also what AHG has learned over the last 30 years of being a ministry for girls.
Yeah, and honestly, Melissa, with troops in all 50 states, we've had this really unique perspective to hear from a really wide variety of people. And the Lord has and continues to connect us with really amazing ministries. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing like word of mouth. So when we find voices that we trust or ministries that are really great resources for parents, we love to share that. And so we're doing that now on our podcast. And so, we do maintain that Christ-centeredness in everything that we do. So, we vet a lot of the things, all the things that come through, but with, nearly 65,000 members across the country, we get a lot of great suggestions coming through, and we like to pass those along.
Yeah, and it's the reason influencers and influencing really works, right? Like,
right.
I think of Amazon. So like there may be a product that I'm looking at, and now they've got the influencers who show the products and talk about the products and so like, were you buying the spin mop before COVID when everyone was using those fancy spin buckets to mop their floors? Probably not. And if you were ahead of your time. So bravo, we applaud you.
Yeah, and just like we could be influenced by whatever kind of, trending product is out there. Our kids are the same exact way. And actually what's exciting about this next generation, which is Gen Alpha, and then those late Zers. I mean, it sounds like we're talking like alien language right now, but anyways, Gen Alpha and the late Zers is that they're really motivated to make a change. So you talk a lot about the social justice that your daughter is really motivated by. So while we might feel like we're stuck in a cycle of doom and gloom in the world, and we get a little, cynical with our old age, and sometimes it can be hard with all that to see things through the eyes of hope. But we can really see that vision through our girls. Which I love, that if we could just stop for a second and be like, wow, she really does want to change the world, and she wants to go out there and make a positive impact. And she can find those silver linings that you were talking about on Tuesday, Melissa. I love that we can have that, again, childlike faith, right? So let's listen to a quick Raising Godly Girls Minute with Patty Garibay. She's founder and executive director, that talks a bit more on this topic of teen ambition. And we'll use that as our jumping off point today.
Do you get tired of biased news reports? You're not alone. News outlets created by and for teens are on the rise. Youth are using engaging platforms to tell and share stories on their terms. How does your daughter get her news? Where is she learning about hot topics like abortion, immigration, and gun control? Knowing which news sources are helping to shape your girl's perspectives is key to guiding her to God's truth. Ask your girl how she consumes the news and what her personal beliefs are on specific issues. Encourage her as she strives to be an informed citizen. Help her view the world's news not through fear and dread, but with compassion and confidence in the good news of the gospel.
I appreciate the minute that Patty just did, because it calls to the heart of us moms, especially with older girls, and Rachel, you've got your older son, um, and if we don't have that really open and honest relationship, we can't have these conversations about the news that she's
Mm.
getting. Um, I certainly cannot control everything that my daughter
Right.
sees. Um, we just can't avoid it. And I wish that, I really think about the influencers when it comes to my mom and my father-in-law, the as seen on TV
Yes.
products. Those were their original influencers, I
So
think.
true.
I have so many as seen on TV
So true. Yeah.
products. Um, but the same is true for our daughters. So how can we prepare her heart to use discernment and media literacy in that same scenario? And from there, it's up to us as parents and their chief disciplers, of our kiddos, to determine what's best for our girls and what's best for our family as a whole. Um, even
Yeah.
ourselves, right? Like sometimes I gotta like grab hold of
Yep.
myself.
Absolutely. And it's different for every kid too. Everyone kind of has their own, level that they can handle when it comes to news and things like that. So I think this isn't a one size fits all for every family or every girl, right? It's really about knowing your girls and their limits. So I often listen to talk radio or news when I'm in the car alone, like typically on my way to pick up a kid from somewhere. So again, another piece of evidence that I have officially entered middle age. I'm now listening to talk radio. But so I usually turn the volume way down when the kids get in the car. So, I can ask them how their whatever fill in the blank was. Well, a couple months back, my daughter was in the car and we were doing our typical, debrief of ballet or whatever it was that she was coming out of. And she said,
Right.
Mama, can you please turn that all the way off? It scares me. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I had no idea that her little ears were still picking up even those quieted murmurs of the news. But even
Yeah.
just like that, I don't know if it was the tone or the rhythm, whatever it was, but it was creating some anxiety in her to hear that. So
Yeah.
clearly now I turn the radio all the way off. But that was my way of knowing that she wasn't ready to engage in the news quite yet. Like she just wasn't there. And that's okay.
Hmm.
Now she'll come to me sometimes with questions we talked about on Tuesday. She'll still ask me every once in a while about Ukraine or what's going on in Israel. And we'll talk through those things, but I let her lead the conversation with questions. And I'm really careful when we go into restaurants or houses that I know will have the news on, that I find her a seat that's out of, either earshot or eyesight. Because I just know that she's got a very tender heart when it comes to that sort of thing. And I think that's, she's a very empathetic little one. And so I think it just hits her harder. Now, with my oldest, I am proactive with questions around news stories because I know things are coming across his eyeballs one way or the other. So I'll often be like, so what do you think about blah, blah, blah? Or have you heard about blah, blah, blah? Because I know that he's consuming news, but I want to make sure that not only is he getting it from reliable sources, but that he's processing it in a healthy way. So sometimes those open-ended questions help me kind of understand where he's at. If he's only getting one piece of the, story, then I can help fill in those blanks. Or if he's like, man, that really frightens me, we can kind of talk through it. But he's not one that's necessarily going to bring it to me. He's getting the news one way or the other, whether that's from his school, history or social studies class, or the Google homepage when he goes to do whatever, it's coming across his eyeballs. So, and, just as we talk with our kids about music or movies or books, like the things that we're putting into our brains, we try to apply that biblical perspective on God honoring consumption of the news as well. And so we base that on Philippians 4:8. And I'll just go ahead and read that for us, Melissa. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. So I think it just goes back to that balance that we talked about, that we have to be balancing our consumption of news and that doom and gloom with the consumption of hope and truth that comes from Scripture.
Actually, when I want to talk about subjects, I love to go to the Colson Center. I love using the Colson Center, and I also love Access. I think Access is a really great jumping off point for us to go deep into a conversation. It'll give me like a little brief synopsis of like a current event and then how to apply it biblically. Because I got to tell you, a lot of times I can't even begin to tie that to the Bible, other than like He is our source of hope, and He is who I put all of our trust in. And we're not going to move out to the boonies, and we do have to live here in the real world. So yeah, those are just some of my places I go for context.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll add Summit into that mix too. So I would say like those three aren't necessarily always like the late breaking kind of news, but they're always biblical perspective on current events, which is super helpful. And I would say too, if your daughter is working on either the digital citizenship badge or the internet adventure badge, those are two great badges that can come alongside when you're talking about media literacy and how to kind of choose reliable resources, especially online. Because as we know, there's no, like online police that are making sure everything that comes through those, wide web doors is truthful and factual. So, but those kind of help girls understand how to navigate that space. And it's a great kind of coupling that you could join up with this media literacy.
Yeah. And, speaking of, just really great resources, we have a really cool guest that's coming on this Saturday with Patty. Her name is Abigail Robertson. She serves as the White House correspondent for CBN News, and she'll be joining Patty to talk about how to keep our girls informed, but biblically rooted in truth from the Bible as they engage with current events. So don't miss this upcoming Saturday episode.
Melissa, thanks for having this conversation today. And listeners, I hope you're able to hit pause and pray for your daughter. Maybe think about some conversation points to bring up around media literacy, especially as we head into election season, and just the best way to consume news in a God-honoring way. Maybe envision a time and a place for that conversation, and just be encouraged that HG is here to provide resources on raising godly girls. This is a Raising Godly Girls podcast, a ministry of American Heritage Girls. We release episodes every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe or follow our show wherever you're listening today. We have a host of resources on our website to support you. Just visit raisinggodlygirls.com. And if your heart aches to experience the community and biblical worldview application that we talked about today, we encourage you to find or even start an AHG troop in your community. Visit AmericanHeritageGirls.org to learn more. Thanks for listening today, and we'll see you soon.